Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Kids Time Together. Today, we're starting a month of talking about all kinds of great stuff. We're actually, today, we're going to be talking about creation. And that's kind of our theme for the month is God's creation. And so, I brought something from home I want to share with you today. And what I brought is this. These, I guess would be more accurate. This is 2 sunflower plants I've started growing in my house. And here's how they came to be. I went to the store. I bought seeds. I brought them home. I left them sitting on the counter unintentionally for 3 weeks or something because I didn't get around to putting them in dirt. Then eventually I got this cream carton. I filled it with dirt. I put the seeds in. And then I watered it, and I set it in a windowsill. And then every day or so, I add more water, to make sure that soil stays moist. Okay? Here's what I found. If I took the seeds and just did nothing with them, like in those 3 weeks where they just sat on my kitchen counter, they didn't start to grow anything. In fact, if I had just left them there forever, they would never change. I mean, things around them would certainly change, but the seeds themselves, they would never grow into plants. We would never have these plants. The seed only becomes a plant when you do something intentional with it. You take it, you stick it in dirt, you add water, you add sunlight. All right? On their own, they don't change. And that's kind of, so what I had to do was be intentional with how I treated the seeds. And that word intentional is a really important word for us today. And so you're probably going to hear me say it a lot. Because creation, God was intentional with how he created things. But I want to help us kind of see this from a different way. And to get that, you got to join me over here at the Lego table. So let's head to the Lego table for a second. All right. Here we go. Let's try this experiment. Now, I love building with Lego. I don't know if you have Lego at home. In my house, we have a lot of Lego. I've loved Lego since I was a kid. But, so I've got here from the church, I've got a little bin of Lego we have here in the classroom. And I don't know, we're gonna try and build something together, okay? Now, I don't know what you love building most. I really like building vehicles. I like helicopters, spaceships are awesome, fast cars, I like sports cars, I like trucks, I just like building vehicles that the guys can go in and drive around and you can move and play with. But see, we have here mostly like blocks, like your regular kind of bricks. So it's probably most appropriate to try and build a house with this, though there are some wheels in here and things like that too. So we'll see what we can come up with. But what we're going to do is we're not going to follow any plans. What I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to, I'm going to take this bin and I'm going to dump it here on my Lego tray, my Lego table, and let's just see what comes out of it. I'm hoping for a house. I think that would make the most sense, but really I'll be happy if anything at all is built. Should we try that? Let's see what happens. Here we go. All right. Now, do you see anything? That's a house, right? No, it's just a pile of pieces. It's not anything in particular. It's like, this was probably all stacked together when we started. It's just pieces. You can't take a tray of Lego and dump it out and expect that something will be built by it. To build something, you've got to actually take a brick, and you've got to stick it down one brick at a time. As you start to put together a plan, maybe it's a plan that you've got on paper out of a book. Maybe it's a plan that's just in the top of your head. That's all good. Some of the best Lego creations come when we're not following plans, but we're just going with whatever's in our brain. I love probably those creations the most. Look at that. In just a minute or less, my foundation is starting to take shape, right? But I could dump tray after tray after tray and we would never have anything like this. These sorts of things come when we start doing something intentional. All right, let's go back to the other table. All right, we're back. So, to get something, you've got to have an intentional approach to it, and that's how God treated creation, and that's how God made stuff. So today, what we want to do is we want to look at Genesis 1 and see how God made everything, and how the earth that we have came to be. And so, in Genesis 1, we find the story of creation. And we have God's process. Not like necessarily step-by-step directions, but we have God's process that he followed for creation. And so what we need to know, first of all, is that long ago, before there was sky, before there was the earth, before there was anything, there was God. That God existed before there was time. God existed before there was anything else. That God is the only one who is absolutely eternal, is kind of the big fancy word for it, right? God is forever. He always will be, and he always was. Okay? So then God decides he's going to create stuff. He's going to create, well, basically everything. And so on the first day that God starts creating, there actually wasn't even days before he started. There was no time at all. And so what God does is when he started everything, he creates time in a way by saying this. He says, and then God said, let there be light. And God saw that the light was good. Right? So there's nothing, there's just darkness, and then God creates light. And then God separates the light from the dark. And he also names the light, he names day, and then the dark, he names night. And so that kind of starts our first sort of important idea and understanding about creation, is that God doesn't just make stuff, he orders it. He gives it a purpose, which we'll see more as we go through, but he gives it kind of a separation, an identity, an order. And so everything that gets created for a reason, and it gets created for a job and to do something. Okay? So that's day one. God creates light. Then we come to day 2. On the second day, God does some more separating. He separates the sky from the earth. And so now there's this difference. It says in Genesis 1, verse 6, God says, let there be a space between the waters. So, because everything was just watery. And then God says, well, we're going to take this upper water and we're going to call that sky. And then this lower water will be something else. All right? So he started separating and ordering these two different bodies of water. That's day 2. Then God comes to day 3. And God says, well, we're going to take, we've got the watery skies above. We're going to now then take what's below that. And we're going to do something really cool with it. So God takes all the waters beneath the sky and you've had them pool together into one place. Not just so that the seas were created and lakes were created and rivers were all organized into different collective areas, and then all around them we now have dry land. And then it says, and this is really important, God saw that it was good. Right? So God has now, we've got like sky, we've got land, we've got seas, oceans, all the waters are all being organized. And what's really important to remember too is that in the sky above, God just didn't say, well, we're going to create the separation. In it, he created like atmosphere. And he created the gases necessary so that we have oxygen to breathe and air to breathe, because air is more than just oxygen. But then we come to day 4. Right? Day 1 was light. Day 2 was the sky. Day 3 is the land, the earth basically, and organized in the way that it is that we often see it. And then we come to day 4. And then it says, God said, let there be lights appear in the sky to separate day from night. So now we're getting time. time. We get seasons. We get days, weeks, months. We get all that kind of stuff. And so God says, okay, we got to have these stars in the sky. We got to have the sun so that it shines bright, so that it warms the earth. It creates the seasons, like I said. It all is producing what we need in order to live. And then God sets the moon in place to reflect the light of the sun at nighttime, to separate and organize so that we see that night is different than day. And God puts all that together in day 4. Then we come to day 5. And now, so you notice, 4 days already, not a single animal, right? But day 5, God starts to create some animals. Day 5, God says, well, let's take the waters of the earth, and now they're going to start to have fish. So God creates all the sea creatures. God starts making tasty ones like, the prawns and the salmon and the trout and some weird, nasty ones that I don't even, like, there's so many creatures in the sea that I couldn't even begin to name them all. And so God creates all of that. And then, because he's not done on day 5, then he also creates like all the birds that fly. Right? Every sort of bird, if it flies. So if it's up in the sky or in the sea, in the lakes and all of that, if it lives in water or lives in the air, God created all of that on day 5. Then, day 6, last day of creation. I think God saved the absolute best for last, because on day 6 we get steak. Here's where we get that. Here's what the Bible says about that. Verse 24, right? God said, let the earth produce every sort of animal, livestock, cows, all right? Livestock, small animals that scurry along the ground, and the wild animals. God creates everything. So day 5 was if it lives in water or sky. Now day 6, dry ground. All the animals that live on the dry ground. And even then, after he creates all those things that we listed, the livestock and whatnot, then it says in verse 26, God says, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They will reign over the fish of the sea and the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals of the earth. So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. So not only does God create then all the animals, God creates people. God creates us on day 6. And then, like he actually does every day, he sort of at some point steps back and goes, oh, that's good. He looks at everything on day 6 and he says, it's good. And what's really important to remember about day 6 too is he created people with a really special purpose. Not only do people, not only are we like God, but we're created. The word I read out here in the Bible is to reign. Some Bibles say to rule or govern. It's basically to care for. Right? Not to boss around and be like, I'm in charge of you, but to like, the real biblical word is we sometimes use in church the word stewardship. It's to take care of. It's to supervise. Like if you have like people will, like your teachers are supervisors over you. They steward your learning. They help you grow and learn. And that's kind of like the job of people in terms of the rest of creation. It's to take care of it. And so what we also have in this whole creation account, and you'll notice that's easy to miss, is that first God creates an environment. God creates, he separates water above, water below, and then he creates the water above the sky as an environment in which birds can thrive, right? So he created like winds, that birds get to fly on. He created everything that they need in order to be uniquely birds. So like just the other day, we're out for a walk as a family. And it's a super windy day, right? And I noticed this crow flying across the sky. But it wasn't flying like a normal crow. Like crows, I don't know if you watch them. I don't watch a lot, but I've never, you don't describe crows as being graceful. Right? When I think of graceful birds, I think of like eagles. I love watching eagles fly. I've seen some eagles do some crazy stuff in the sky. Crows, not so much. But this crow was out in there and it caught a tailwind, right? And that's when the wind is blowing, like the crow is flying in the same direction as the wind. And so the wind is pushing this bird along the sky. Man, that thing flew across the sky like a jet fighter. Like it was just like, gone. It was awesome. Right? And God organized the sky in all that kind of way so that it would not only have the air that we need to breathe and the animals need to breathe in order to live, but so that birds can take advantage of it and fly. Then God also organized all the land, right? Created plants and vegetation that will grow, that the land animals can eat to survive and to keep on reproducing after themselves. So God created this environment that would sustain life of land animals. God created the seas, the oceans, the lakes in such a way that the watery environment would sustain the life of the animals that he created to live in it. So God creates the environment necessary to sustain future life, and it all has a purpose. The clover in the field has a purpose. All right? It all serves ultimately God's purpose, but it all has a purpose within creation itself. And so that's a really important thing for us to remember. Now, as you know, not everybody believes that what the Bible says about creation is true. And if we were to read closer to the end of the Bible, in Hebrews chapter 11, we have what's often called the faith chapter, because whoever wrote the letter of Hebrews, he talks about a number of people from the Old Testament who had lives of great faith. And so he kind of says, this is someone who showed us what a life of faith looks like, and he tells about all the good stuff they did, which followed God. But in verse 3, right near the beginning of that chapter, we read this lesson that it is really by faith that we understand that God made the universe the way he made it. It's by faith that helps us accept that God created everything. And every person of great faith, part of their faith in God is understanding that God created what we have. And that brings us to this month's memory verse. And it comes from Jeremiah 32, verse 17. And in there, Jeremiah he's exclaiming to God, sovereign Lord, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you. And there's really two important lessons about God in this verse. That's why it's such a great verse for us to learn. First, God, he is absolutely powerful. There's nothing that God can't do. Or let me say that more positively so it's easier to hear. God can do anything. He is absolutely powerful. The second important lesson in there is that God is the one who made the heavens and the earth. Everything we can experience, everything that science is finding out in the universe, right? All the different constellations and planets and stars, all of that God made. All the creatures of the sea that we know about, that we don't yet know about, all of that God made. God made everything that is. It all comes from him. And he can do that because he's absolutely powerful. So a few things for you this week. If you want to head over and do your field notes, if you're kind of in the older group, what I'm going to have you do is go through Genesis 1 to help you fill in the blanks, right? I know the words are up at the top, but you can go through Genesis 1 and figure out the blanks. Recap what was created on each day of creation, all right? And then just some other kind of creation activities there. Or if you're younger, why don't you choose your four favorite things that God made and draw a picture of each one, all right? And then share that with someone. Share it with your parents, put it up on the fridge. You know what? Parents, you could take a picture, you could send it to me. I'd love to see what your kids come up with. Their four favorite things that God made. Draw them out for us. All right? Thanks for joining us this morning. Have a great week enjoying God's creation. We'll see you next week.